Welcome back to the Engineered Angler. I'm still doing a lot of experimentation with this Rotocaster, which allows me to cast these hollow body lures. Not just because they kind of look cool and they look like what you would buy if you were buying from a fabricator, but because as a lure maker, it gives me a few other options. I could add BBs or large balls or any kind of noise maker in this after it actually is cast. And you get that added visual interest from a painted lure, especially when you paint with transparent paints. And if this is your first time to the channel, my name's Franco. I'm a professional engineer, a lure designer and lure maker, and an avid fisherman. And I make these videos to share some of the tips and tricks I've picked up along the way and to add just a little bit of physics and engineering into the art of lure making. Now, the holy grail of this rotocasting stuff, at least for me, is to be able to produce a soft plastic topwater bass frog. And to be able to do that, you gotta have 2-part soft plastic. So I got myself a couple of different hardness, polyurethane, 2-part rubber. The idea is what we'll do a little experimentation with the two different hardnesses, mix a little bit, put it in the mold, rotocast it, and see what kind of results we end up with. Now, I had already done a couple of experiments using the mold for this little crankbait, and it seems to work pretty good. Now, it's broken right there because I just pulled it to see how strong it was. But I think this bodes well for this experiment. I'm hoping that not only will we be able to actually cast these things, but we'll be able to paint them too. All right, let's go ahead and see how this one turned out. This one's another crankbait using the standard hard plastic opaque casting resin. And let's see what this looks like when we open it up here. Not too bad. A tiny bit of flashing, not too bad. Looks pretty good. It's obviously hollow. And while I didn't put a belly hook hardware on there, I did put the wire eyes for the tail hook and the tie-on eye, just like this one. And the idea is that I'm going to take these and we'll take it out to the shop. And I'm going to connect these things to my ceiling hoist connected to a mini crane scale. And we're going to pull on these things till they break. And we'll do that with the clear ones too and find out if there's a strength issue. I don't know if using these materials actually creates a problem with the ultimate strength of the lure, but we're going to find out. Stick around to the end of the video, and that's when I'm going to break these guys. But let's go ahead and get started on the frog design. It's not going to be anything fancy. It does have to be narrow enough in the back to fit that double hook. I'm going to have a hole going through the tail for the legs to come through. And the hook should come out of the body right about near the tail and curve up so the body protects it from the weeds. And then it'll come through up here in this little bit of a spout that I'm going to leave on the nose. The fact that there's more volume above a line from the tail to the nose is on purpose, because as you're designing your lure, you also have to keep in mind how you're going to build your mold. And it's going to be important for this kind of casting. This way I can put more than half the volume of the lure in the top half of the mold. Now, as far as size of this thing, I got a little carried away with the size of the hook. It's pretty massive, so we're going to have to scale our frog up. So the frog's going to be 2.5 inches long. So if this is the top of the lure, the widest point should be right where the point of the hooks would be, and that'll be right at 1 inch. And the height of it is just going to be a little bigger than the gap on the hook, so about 3/4 of an inch. And I haven't forgotten about the giveaway. I'm going to be giving this full air compressor package by TimberTech to one of you folks that helped out getting my other YouTube channel, Sailing in Real Life, up to 1,000 subscribers. Thank you everybody who went over there, subscribed, and put in their "here for EA" comment, which puts you in for this drawing. And I'm going to go ahead and filter through all those comments, put it in a big spreadsheet, do a random selection on them, and then go back and get the information and contact you. I'll also put the winner in the comments of this video, and I'm going to put it in the community comments as well. And I'll announce who the winner is sometime during the video, so keep an eye out for that. So I'm going to get started making the master for this frog. So I've got to make the frog out of wood, get it all cleaned up and shaped exactly how I want it, and then make a silicone mold from it. So then we can use the Rotocaster. In the meantime, and at the same time, I've got to do some additional experimentation with materials. I'm not really sure which one of the 2-part polyurethane rubber I'm going to use for the frog itself. And while I've been showing you all the nice castings that I've gotten, I've also gotten some real duds. Distorted ones, ones with holes in them, holes and missing chunks, and even squash body. So that means I'm not completely set on my technique for doing this. If you haven't seen the initial build of this rotocasting machine, and you're interested in the topic at all, you definitely need to go back and take a look at this video. I'll put a link to it in the description. But let me show you the improvements I've made. I've made 2 big changes to the design. One is I replaced this motor. The original motor was a 100 RPM motor, and I found that the slower I went, the better casting I was getting. And I could only get this down to about 35, 40 RPM. So I replaced it with a 20 RPM motor. Now I can just run it at 12 volts and I get my 20 RPMs. The other thing I put in is this programmable timer, and it's not just a timer, it actually will do cycles, it'll turn on and off. So it's pretty sophisticated and pretty inexpensive, surprisingly. But as you can see right there, it flashes the word poop the whole time. So I'm pretty sure their programmer is like a 13-year-old American kid. So I've used balsa only because it's so easy to work. It's just easy to cut, easy to sand, and I don't have to worry about putting any really fine details in here, so I don't care that it doesn't carve very well. It's just a matter of getting that general frog shape. Let's go ahead and do an experiment. I need to find out how the harder of the 2 soft plastics will turn out in the mold. But in the meantime, I want to do another one of these polyester resin clear lures so that I have 2 to break, not just 1. And that's what the wire hangers look like. This is going to be the tie-on eye. And I just set it in there, and when the 2 halves come together, it'll hold it in place. Let me show you how I make them. I'm using this 218-pound leader wire. It's 0.033 inches in diameter or 0.82 millimeters. And I'll take a pair of jeweler's pliers, and you can find all this stuff on my Amazon store. I try to keep good links in Amazon for anything that I use that I think is worth having. And I'll leave about 3/4 of an inch of tail, bend an eye into it, and bend back a little shoulder. So the 2 legs end up pretty close to being parallel. And then about 1/16 of an inch from the shoulder, I bend it in, good and hard, almost 90 degrees. And I do the same thing to the other leg. Then it's just a matter of cutting off the excess. And we end up with a little figure 8 that should go right there for the tail hook. So I'm going to take the polyester resin, and I need about 15 grams of it. All right, that's about 15.5. That's close enough. And I think I'm going to go ahead and experiment a little bit with this violet dye. This is a violet resin dye. It's from Alumilite, and the tiniest little bit, see that tiny dot on the end of that wire, the tiniest little bit will actually make a difference. And now we got semi-violet. It'll get better stirred in once I put in the hardener. And I find that about 3 drops for every 10 grams gives me a fast enough hardening time. So I'm going to do 5 drops in this one. 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's got a kind of a mild blue, violet kind of color. And we'll pour it into the mold. And do it nice and slow so it fills up the cavity for the dive bib. All right, drop the other half on it. And we'll put it in here, snug it down, and get it started. Now the timer is set for 3 hours, 10 minutes. That'll give it enough time to get good and solid, and I'll be able to turn it off, but it won't really be ready to be demolded for another 2 or 3 hours after that. All right, I'm gonna sit here and shape this thing away from that whiny motor noise and with a really nice view of the lake, and I'll get back to you guys when this thing's almost done. I'm going to go ahead and give this thing a clear coat and cure it in my new mini UV curing chamber. So this first clear coat will be more of a sanding sealer than anything else, and it shouldn't take more than 10 minutes to have that good and hard. All right, this thing has turned itself off. Let's see how the lure's set up and whether it's gonna be worth a damn. Here, I'll share the moment of opening it. It looks pretty good. To say this is looking like one of the better ones. Oh yeah, so we've got a little bit of thickness at the very back, which is a good thing, and a little bit of thickness at the very front, which is also a good thing. So it's still just slightly tacky, so I'm gonna hang it up and let it set. It is a little bit violet, but I'm not too worried about the color because this thing's gonna get destroyed probably tomorrow or the day after. I wanna be sure it's fully set. All right, now that our mold is free, let's go ahead and try the flexible polyurethane rubber. This is the harder stuff, so I haven't tried this yet. Let's go ahead and do a lure with it. I'm not gonna put any wire in it, no hangers or anything, because it's not gonna get tested like that. We're just gonna see how well it actually forms and how hard, how pliable it is. So I'm gonna use about 6 grams of part A and 6 grams of part B. I don't have time with this to actually degas it. It only gives me 6 minutes of working time. So we gotta work a little bit fast and get it in the mold and get it turning before it stiffens up. So it does kind of retain a bunch of bubbles. And hopefully that won't be a problem as we go and make the frog with it. Should do it. All right, let's get it cranking. This one's a little faster. I should be able to demold it in about an hour and a half. Now we can get started on making our mold box. I like to use Legos. I make a frame out of it, and then I fill the box with some zero sulfur clay. That makes a nice flat clay bed, and then I can embed the lure down into it. With the walls of the mold box built up, I can start drizzling in some of the silicone I just mixed. I like to drizzle a little on top to make sure I don't get any bubbles on the surface of the lure. Then it's just a matter of pouring in the rest of the silicone to form the first half of the lure mold. And with that, we'll have to let this sit overnight, so I might as well close up shop and call it a night. Head in for a little bit of supper. Alright guys, it's been a couple of days since I last videotaped anything out here. I've been struggling with this silicone. It actually remained tacky, still a little bit tacky, which was really surprising because it actually was hard to the touch on the outside within like 3 hours. It's been at least like 40 hours since I cast this thing and it's still a little tacky. So I'm hoping that the next half of the mold will set. And I've got the hardware in the blank. These will form the holes for the hooks and the tail. And in the meantime, I haven't even opened up that mold that we set in the Rotocaster, I guess a couple of days ago. And I don't even know what this is going to look like. But we'll open it together here, I guess. Doesn't look too bad. No, I do see one issue here. Oh, a couple issues. All right, one is that there's a piece of the bib missing. But the more important one is that it feels pretty hard. Definitely a holding air, so it's like a little balloon. So I'm not really sure if this is going to be soft enough. Might end up having to use the softer rubber. Let's see if it bounces. Oh yeah. All right, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and use the softer plastic and cast another one of these rubber little crankbaits as a test. And hopefully when we figure out which one to use, we'll have a mold to use it in. So I was experimenting with a new silicone. This is from Let's Resin. And I can't recommend it. It stays tacky way too long. So I'm going to do something that I recommend against. And that is I'm going to pour silicone from a different brand. This is BB Dino. And I find this pretty consistent and works pretty well. And I'm going to use it to try to ensure that we get a quick set. Now the reason you don't want to mix 2 different brands is because over time the mold will change shape a little bit. Sometimes it expands a little bit. Sometimes it shrinks a little bit. And if you've got 2 different brands of silicone, you'll have a mold with two halves that have different sizes. Just so you know, I did apply Vaseline on that other half. I do prefer this brand, and I have it on my Amazon store in case you guys are looking for it. All right, it's time to start breaking some lures. And I want to start out with a factory-made lure. This is one I silver plated, and it didn't come out that great, so I'm willing to sacrifice it. We'll see how big of a load it takes to actually yank those eyes out of the body. And I've got a bungee loosely attached here, so when it pops, it doesn't go flying all over the place. Looks like 18.5 pounds was the most it reached. All right, so that was pretty dismal. The nose eye ripped out. And if you look at that hardware, it's pretty thin. It's small stuff. And it doesn't go in very far into the lure. So maybe a little over a quarter inch. Now these are sort of light duty freshwater lures. Let's try it with a saltwater lure. This is also a factory made lure, but you can see the hardware is just a little hardier. And again, it's the nose eye that yanks out. And while that little figure 8 is a little heavier wire, it definitely wasn't any deeper. All right, let's get to breaking ours. But before we actually break ours, let me show you the latest catastrophe with that stupid silicone mold. Check this out. I had to take a little board and drive a nail in it. You can see that little nail just deep enough to hold the body of the lure in the bottom half of the mold because it kept wanting to float up. And because it didn't set right when I pulled the clay off, it pulled the lure off with it. Note to self, it might be a good idea when you're just making a master and that's all it's going to be, to load it with some lead so it's heavy enough to sink on its own, just in case it becomes dislodged from being inside the lower part of the mold. We'll have to see how this comes out. All right, I want to start out with this one. It's a bit of a poorly shaped one. It's got a big hole in the side, but it's the only one I have that actually is an epoxy clear resin. It's the only one I was able to actually get close to being testable. So let's see what this one does. Because if this one actually is stronger, even with a hole in it, then we know that epoxy is the way to go. Woo! Substantially greater. Wow. All right, you can see where it tore out the front of it, and that's what the little wire looks like. And it looked like about 150 pounds of force. That's a lot more than those factory-made ones. The scale shut itself off just before I broke this one. Man, that stinks. That scale has such a short auto shut off. It's gotten me a couple of times that way. But if you take a look at this, even though we didn't get an actual load, I'm not sure it would have helped us much. It would have been a one-off kind of thing because this is a very different style of anchor that I put in it. And what failed was the plastic itself. It actually yanked the whole nose off of it. All right, let's test the other clear one. It does have the figure 8 style anchor, and maybe we'll get an actual reading on the scale. Woo! That exploded. That looks like 95 to me. You can see the whole face exploded out, and you can see the figure 8 shape. All right, I'm going to use these things now. These are polyurethane casting resin, and I was pretty careful to use the same amount of material on both, and I think they both have the same style anchor, but I don't know. I don't remember. Now I'm turning the scale off and on just before I do it because I don't want to get busted again. All right, that was substantially less. It was about 38 pounds, which is pretty close to what that saltwater lure did. All right, this one tore out of the tail, which is the first one to tear out of the tail. So, but it is a smaller gauge wire. So that tells me I really need to use a thicker gauge wire. I think I did that on the next one. All right, here we go. Okay, that one just sort of slid out. So definitely need to use a heavier gauge wire. All right, let's try one more thing with these guys. Let's see how well they deal with being dropped on concrete. Let's see if they shatter. All right, here's where I'm gonna break it. There's a concrete slab right here in front of these steps. Hopefully the steps and this porch will keep the shards from going anywhere, if there are any. And I'm gonna start off with the factory made one. And I'm gonna first just drop it from me standing up on here, use that as my normal. And then I'm just gonna start throwing it hard until it breaks. All right, so the factory made one, I'm not gonna be able to get to break, I don't think. So that's pretty impressive. Let's see how delicate these guys are. First, the epoxy resin one. So we start with just a drop, and then we go to a slightly harder throw, and move on to an even harder throw. And finally, we fracture it with a good hard throw. All right, broke right where you would expect it to, right behind where the hole was, and in the thinnest part of the lure. But that's pretty tough. I got a feeling this resin isn't going to be nearly as tough. First we drop. Oh yeah, that shattered. With the next lure, it actually lost its bib right on its first drop, but didn't fracture otherwise. So we moved on to a little bit harder throw. And that did it. It flew to pieces. So I moved on to the polyurethane casting resin. After its first drop, which it survived perfectly, I started throwing it kind of hard, and it just bounced. And I kept throwing it harder and harder, until finally, on this shot, the dive bib flew off, but it never really did break. All right, guys, one more catastrophe, because once they start happening, they just keep going. So what happened here is my pulley shaft on the top of this thing that drives the center square broke away, and that is because the engineer who designed this didn't really take into account that this thing was being loaded without being supported down here. So what I need to do, besides replace this shaft, is I need to get a thrust bearing down on this surface and have the pulley flush up against the thrust bearing. This way this thing is loaded appropriately and doesn't end up getting fatigued from cyclical loading, which is what I should have been thinking about when I first designed it, but I guess I was in a hurry as usual. But I think we got enough time rotating this mold that we can take a look at and see what that soft plastic looks and feels like. All right, let's see if it's in one piece at least. Oh, that looks pretty good. Oh yeah, I think we've got a winner. As far as the right texture, I think it's not quite completely set, but it's pretty close. Oh yeah, check that out. It's like a little balloon. I think that's gonna be just the right hardness of plastic for a soft plastic frog. That is so freaking cool. All right, so recapping, what did we learn today? First of all, we found out that polyester lures are strong but brittle. Hollow epoxy lures are much less brittle and just as strong, maybe a little stronger. Polyurethane is strong and not brittle at all. It can really take an impact. And we learned that the softer of the rubbers, the Flex It 40 from Specialty Resins, is the right softness, I think, for making a soft plastic topwater bass lure. And as far as making that bass lure this time, as you can see, we're still in the throes of disaster here. Hopefully that mold is usable, but I don't have a whole lot of hopes for it. So I'm going to end the video here. And I almost forgot that we've got a winner to announce. And the winner of the TimberTech airbrush combo with a compressor and everything is New Hope Fishing Lures. That's Ron Sensenig. Anyway, Ron, I'm going to send you an email. Hopefully this email is good. I'll put a comment on your channel. And all you got to do is email me at engineeredangler@gmail.com. And again, thank you to everyone who actually went over to that channel, subscribed, left messages, watched videos. That was really cool and really made it a lot of fun to try to get that little YouTube channel to grow just a little bit. I hope you found all this testing interesting. I'm still super stoked to make these hollow lures, and I've got a bunch of ideas that I think is going to be a lot of fun to do, including lipless crankbaits with all kinds of rattles in them and other topwater lures and crankbaits. I think as long as you're using a fast curing resin, it's just as quick to make them on the roto machine as it is just doing it on the desktop. And if you want to see me break other stuff, testing it to see how strong it is, I've got a playlist that should appear up here somewhere. You should go ahead and click on that and check it out.